You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
And now, a word from our sponsor, the Data Citizens Dialogues podcast. As a listener of this podcast, you're probably at least marginally interested in data, especially about all the different ways that it shapes our world. So I want to recommend the Data Citizens Dialogues podcast. This is a forward-thinking show brought to you by the folks at Calibra. They're the leaders in data intelligence. You're going to hear firsthand from all sorts of people, industry titans, innovators, executives from some of the largest companies as they dive into the hottest topics in data. You're going to get insights into everything from popular things such as AI governance and data sharing, down to more nuanced questions like how do we ensure data readability at a global scale? So while data may be shaping our world, Data Citizens Dialogues is shaping the conversation. I want to encourage you to follow Data Citizens Dialogues on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check it out. We thank Data Citizens Dialogues for sponsoring our show.
Is it time to reimagine your future? The right business skills may make a difference in your career. At Capella University, we offer a relevant education that's designed to focus on what you need to know in the business world. We'll teach professional skills to help you pursue your goals, like business management, strategic planning, and effective communication. And you can apply these skills right away. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Curious about how you can achieve smooth, natural-looking, long-lasting filler results? The Juvederm collection of fillers has 6 unique gel fillers that add subtle volume and are designed for different needs in specific areas of the face, like lips, cheeks, chin, smile lines, under eyes, and jawline. Ask your licensed specialist for a full face assessment today and download the ALLE app, that's ALLE, the official loyalty program of Juvederm, to save on treatments and get a look that's true to you. For important safety information and to find a licensed specialist, visit Juvederm.com. That's JUVEDERM.com. Not for people with severe allergic reactions, allergies to lidocaine, or the proteins used in Juvederm. Common side effects include injection site redness, swelling, pain, tenderness, firmness, lumps, bumps, bruising, discoloration, or itching. There's a risk of unintentional injection into a blood vessel, which can cause vision abnormalities, blindness, stroke, temporary scabs, or scarring. Talk to a licensed specialist to find out if it's right for you.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for this N2K Cyberwire special edition. In today's Solution Spotlight, N2K's Simone Petrella interviews Alex Stamos, CISO at SentinelOne. They got together at the ISC2 Security Congress 2024 to discuss lessons learned in 2024 and what it could mean for 2025.
So we're here at the ISC2 Security Congress for 2024, and I know you are going to be chatting with the audience, both in person and virtually here in a bit. But one of the things I wanted to start with was, 2024, where the landscape kind of started, and what, in your opinion, were some of the more significant breaches or attacks of 2024 that are shaping the way that we think about the cybersecurity industry?
Yeah, we've had kind of a crazy year. So the keynote today is I'm pulling 3 incidents out. Not all kind of traditional breaches. One of them is. But 3 incidents I think really shaped the cybersecurity landscape, and I'm pulling different lessons out. So those 3 things are, I'm talking about the Cyber Safety Review Board's report of the Chinese intrusion into Microsoft, and the follow-on Russian intrusion into Microsoft, but especially the lessons to learn of what happened with China and Microsoft, which actually happened last year, but the report came out this year and has a lot of lessons for us. The multiple security incidents that came out of the Snowflake multiple breaches, not of Snowflake themselves, but other customers. And then the massive CrowdStrike outage, which has had real massive repercussions for the security industry and for CISOs that deploy security products.
Well, I think it's a great segue because as a CISO, now on vendor side, but also having been within the corporate side as well, what are some of the things that you think you're taking away as a CISO when you think about those events?
Yeah, so I'll take those in order. So the Microsoft one, I mean I recommend all CISOs to read, if you haven't yet, the Cyber Safety Review Board's report about Microsoft. Now, the technical specifics are very specific to Microsoft, right? These are bugs that are specific to how did Microsoft build their authentication system for Office Online, and how were their keys stored and stolen by the Chinese and then eventually used to read the email of people who work for the U.S. government. It was eventually, this is not a breach that was discovered by Microsoft. It was discovered by folks who work for the government and then told Microsoft that it happened. But the lessons that everybody can learn, even though the bugs are specific to Microsoft, are a couple. One, half-finished security projects will kill you, right? If you look at step by step of what happened inside of Microsoft, almost everything in there Microsoft knew about, and they were working on it. They just weren't done yet, right? And one of the things I'm going to do for a little audience participation in the keynote today is I'm going to have everybody raise their hand if they don't have partially finished projects on their risk register, right? And I expect nobody to raise their hand. This is just true for any CISO, is we have things that we know are weaknesses that we've been working on, and perhaps for years, right? It's sometimes it's easy to get to 80% done, 90% done. It's like a Windows progress bar. You can get to 99%, but actually finishing, turning off that last server, getting rid of that last key is impossible because you have some dangling dependency.
Right. And
one of the lessons there is the attackers don't care if you're 99% done. If that key works, if that server's up, they'll use it, right? And so that's one of the lessons I think that's really important there is sometimes you have to push through that last 1% because that residual risk is so big. I'm sure Microsoft wishes that they had pushed through whatever it is, that last little bit that kept them from turning off that old 2016 encryption key would have saved a lot of pain for them.
It sounds like the adage, kind of, if everything's a priority, then nothing is a priority.
Yeah, exactly. Another lesson there is we've built really flat homogeneous networks, right? Cloud computing is great in a lot of ways, but what's happened is the biggest beneficiary has been Wall Street, right? Is that Wall Street has forced CIOs to kind of squeeze out all of the excess cost of running IT, and so you have IT budgets at public companies. They've gotten rid of all the fat, and now you have a small number of people providing services to a huge number of internal customers. And the ratios of the number of sysadmins or DevOps engineers versus the number of containers or end systems is spectacular. Thousands and thousands of machines per admin. And that's great until a bad guy gets their hand on one of those systems, right? And so, one of the things we'll be talking about in the keynote is friction is not necessarily a bad thing, especially at the administrative level, is that we got to embrace friction a little bit more. Microsoft in this situation built keys that worked across every single one of their customers. And so if they had built a little less of a homogeneous system, they would have had natural fire breaks in there, and it would have cost them more. It would have been a little more difficult in some ways, but it also would have meant that it would not have been so easy for the Chinese government to penetrate their systems. And again, that there's specifics that are specific to Microsoft, but you see the same pattern at every company of, well, why not just make everything flat and easy? Because it's so much easier and simpler for us. And I think that's a natural progression of where cloud has taken IT architectures. But the reality is we got to see that there is a natural benefit to friction, especially at the administrative level.
I know you also are going to talk about Snowflake, but do you think that that's a friction that we also should be embracing as a cybersecurity community and industry too? Because your third example is CrowdStrike, and that's an example where it behooves a frictionless environment to have one primary,
yes,
provider,
right.
But when it's tied to something that it's so fundamental to what we actually rely on.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example of, the fact that it is very likely for a company to have one EDR product means that if it breaks, if it either fails because it misses something, it misses it everywhere. And if it breaks all your systems at once. Now, CrowdStrike in particular made specific architectural decisions that were extremely risky. And I think, they certainly are not going to make the same mistake again. And I think most companies would not make that mistake. But you still could see failures from products where you can have, every EDR product is at some kind of conflict or something. And certainly they all miss things, right? And I do think that has raised up the question for people of like, hey, should we, maybe go 50-50 with security products? Certainly a number of companies have decided, great, our primary and our business continuity sites are going to run different security features. I know like one of those airlines that was involved, they had like an operations center that was this beautiful operations center that had, rows and rows of computers where these professionals work very, very tirelessly to, move airplanes around and move crews around and like deal with, oh no, there's a hurricane coming, so we've got to reroute everything. And they work incredibly hard to do that. And they had CrowdStrike on all the machines, and then they have an identical operations center 30 miles away and has its own generators and its own power grid, but they're also running CrowdStrike. So it doesn't matter that everything was physically separate.
Right.
Within seconds of this entire building blue screening, the second machine, operations center blue screened. They will not make that mistake again, right? That second operations center is going to have a different security products, different firewalls, different switches. Now, you can't get rid of Windows. Microsoft has a monopoly there. But what you can do is you can run on a different Azure tenant. You have a different Intune tenant. You can run N-1 patching for Windows. And so I think this is, again, where having non-homogeneous networks of embracing friction, of having your primary and your BCP site be quite different from an IT perspective. It's a big pain. This is where system integrators might come into handy, where you end up paying a system integrator to run your BCP site for you, and to make it as different as possible is going to be worthwhile.
We'll be right back. Hey everybody, Dave here. I want to talk about our sponsor, LegalZoom. I started my first business back in the early 90s, and what I would have done to have been able to have the services of an organization like LegalZoom back then. Just getting all of those business ducks in a row, all of that technical stuff, the legal stuff, the registrations of the business, the taxes, all of those things that you need to go through when you're starting a business, the hard stuff, the stuff that sucks up your time when you just want to get that business launched and out there. Well, LegalZoom has everything you need to launch, run, and protect your business all in one place. And they save you from wasting hours making sense of all that legal stuff. Launch, run, and protect your business to make it official today at LegalZoom.com. You can use promo code CYBER10 to get 10% off any LegalZoom business information product, excluding subscriptions and renewals. That expires at the end of this year. Get everything you need from setup to success at LegalZoom.com and use promo code CYBER10. That's LegalZoom.com and promo code CYBER10. LegalZoom provides access to independent attorneys and self-service tools. LegalZoom is not a law firm and does not provide legal advice except where authorized through its subsidiary law firm, LZ Legal Services, LLC. When it comes to ensuring your company has top-notch security practices, things can get complicated fast. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and more, saving you time and money. With Vanta, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Our listeners can claim a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/cyber. That's VANTA.com/cyber for $1,000 off Vanta.
it's hard for me to think about this conversation and not think about the impact that this kind of has on the workforce for 2024, 2025. So ISC2 has released their workforce study. It's kind of the first year that things have stagnated from a cybersecurity professionals globally standpoint. It's actually been decreasing a bit in the United States. Are we getting to the point that a lot of these friction points should also kind of be a reminder to get back to the principles of we also need to spend enough time having redundancy in the humans that we actually have performing this work?
Right. Yeah, no, I think so. And I think the CrowdStrike outage proved that. I mean, that's one of the things all these people learned was it's great to have one admin per 10,000 boxes until you have to reboot 10,000 machines, right? Like, some of those airlines, weeks later, I was still seeing blue screens in airports. And it's because they don't have the people to go out there with USB keys.
Yeah,
right?
we'll leave the burnout conversation for another day.
Yes, right. But it is a legitimate issue of like when things go wrong, yes, 1 to 10,000 is a ratio that totally works and everything's working perfectly. And when it hits the fan, not having that kind of slack space is a problem. And I do think we have cut too quickly. People have, I think, made assumptions around automation and hyperautomation and orchestration systems and such that aren't necessarily accurate. And I do see this all the time with companies that before I took the CISO role at 1001, I was supervising the DFIR team and working with companies from a consulting perspective. And I would deal with breaches all the time where they did not just have the right security people, they didn't have the IT capacity to deal with a breach, right? It's like, oh, we've got to rebuild laptops. We don't have the people. We've got to rebuild our Oracle database and our production systems. We don't have the people because we barely have enough people to keep things ticking over normally because we've cut to the bone. And so I do think, and you will pay out the nose when you call PwC or Deloitte on a Friday evening at 6 p.m. to help you recover from a ransomware incident. They will charge you the maximum amount possible. And in the end, the CFO will not see that savings over the 5-year period that they thought they would get from cutting all those IT folks. So I do think CIOs need to be looking big picture of what it is like when you go down to having 95% of the people necessary to run during normal operations, because over a 5-year period, nobody just has normal operations. Something bad will happen every 6 months. And you need to have the slack space to be able to handle that.
Yeah. Hard to keep that long-term perspective in mind sometimes. So when you're trying to justify your budget in front of the CFO, who's like, well, it's been 2 years, nothing's happened. So
you're like, oh, well, you're going to penalize me for doing a good job?
Right.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I can make something happen, right? Like, it's definitely not the kind of, yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what happens when you do that.
Yes, exactly.
But okay. What changes do you anticipate in the cybersecurity field as we look towards 2025 as a result of some of the challenges we did face this year? Do you see anything changing as a result? Are we going to make headway on some of the barriers we've had?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think for security vendors like ourselves, there's a lot more questions being asked about how are we not blowing things up. So, one of the things I talk about in the keynote, I actually throw up a screenshot from a still from the Bridge over River Kwai, which is a screenshot I actually use in class. I teach at Stanford on Fridays, and my students don't know what that picture is, right? So it's great. There's a lot of more. I don't have the only gray hair in this audience.
All right. There's generational kind of commentary to be had.
So it's good. So there's people here who know what the movie is, right?
People will know.
Yeah, and people who listen to the podcast know about that movie. So I don't have to explain that. This is a picture of the bridge, and so it's like Sir Al Guinness in his very sweaty khakis in front of the bridge, and talk about CIOs built this beautiful bridge of architecture, of IT architecture. It's supposed to be incredibly reliable. And then security teams, our job is we rig this bridge with C4, and we blow up the bridge in case, the moment we see an enemy train coming over it, right? Like what we do as security teams is innately destructive. I mean, you just listen to the language we use, right? Like we block things, we isolate, we kill processes. We build systems that break the normal flow of IT to stop bad guys from doing things. And that's fine. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be. But I think post-CrowdStrike, what's happened is CIOs have been like, wait a second, I build this beautiful, super redundant system in all these clouds and all these availability zones. And then I give SOC analyst 2 this huge red button that says, destroy all enterprise value. Right?
Yeah.
Why do I do that? And so I think one of the things that's changed is that security vendors and security teams themselves now have to justify to the CIO and the CEO and boards, why do we have this power? And I think that's actually a good thing. It's a good thing for vendors to say, okay, well, yes, we're actually much more careful than CrowdStrike in how we architect our kernel module. We're much more careful in how we test. We're much more careful in how we deploy. That was always true, but now we have to document it. So that's good. We're documenting that better. We're proving that better to folks. But it's also then we have to build our product to help teams operationalize that better. So I think this is one of the things that you're going to start to see security products in 25 and 26 and going forward, is it's going to be a lot easier to build a product so that SOC Analyst 2 can do their job without having the destroy enterprise value button. Because traditionally it's been, you get onboarded in one of these products, and right next to do your job normally is the kill everything button. And it's not super easy to build things in a default secure. It's not super easy to build it so that there's 2 keys to launch the nuclear missile, right?
Yeah.
And those are the kinds of things that companies have built, but it had to be extra. You had to build a bunch of frameworks to do that and such. And that should become the default. And I think that should become the default in IT in a lot of ways, not just on the security side.
Do you think that that's something that is a lesson that's also will be applied on the corporate side where they're evaluating vendors and actually having to make decisions?
I hope so. Yes, I hope so. And I hope like what happens is corporate teams think about, okay, what is our workflow here? How are we going to, because, like I said, EDR, security products break CrowdStrike's the only people to break the entire world, but security products break companies all the time. It's almost never the product's fault. It's almost always somebody inside the company uses the product to shoot the company in the foot. And then they blame the company. And this is no offense to any SentinelOne customers who are listening to this. I'm not talking about you. You're not the ones who I know blamed us because you did something. It's not you. I'm talking about somebody else, right?
Clearly not in consulting where I used to come from, where it was like, no, actually, how do we tell you the problem is you?
Yes, right, exactly. Yes. But it's possible I have been on phone calls where I'm like, okay, you want to blame us. You're clearly paying us for our job is to take the heat for you guys, but you're the guys who pushed the button that actually did this. And that happens all the time. And so I think companies need to think through, okay, what is our normal flow here of a piece of malware comes down, it is communicating up to an IP address. We're going to decide that IP address is malicious. How do we decide that IP address really is the command and control server and that is not the corporate proxy server or the corporate DNS server, which it happens? And that once you block that corporate proxy server, you cut off all the computers in the network from the corporate proxy server and you break the entire network, right? Those are the kinds of process things that aren't appropriately thought out of. They have to be thought out of, and then products like ours and other security products need to support that and make that easy for that kind of flow to be supported in the company so that somebody says, I want to block this, and then it goes to their manager, right? Or, with AI now, it gets smart enough to be like, it looks like you want to block the corporate proxy server. Have you, Clippy pops up and says, I think Clippy itself is probably copyrighted, but we could have our own Clippy, right?
I guess you're the first person in many, many years who have actually referred to Clippy in a positive way. So
yeah, well, positive security Clippy pops up and says, it looks like you're trying to destroy the entire enterprise. Maybe I can help you by saying you shouldn't do that. And so I do think there are going to be some positive changes there. And I do think Gen AI has some real positive opportunities here to speed up defensive cycles. Right now it's being used in positive ways to make queries faster, right? And so for us, we call it purple, where you can, you could always ask, show me all the laptops that downloaded a new piece of software from a Russian IP address, right? You could always ask that. But you'd have to write this huge query with a bunch of quotation marks, and you'd have to know exactly what you're doing. It would take you 20 minutes, right? Now you just write that in English, and you hit enter, and it does it for you. And that's great. But taking that data and doing something with it's a whole nother step. So we've gotten that first part down. And I think that's the next phase too, is then turning it okay, great, now you give me that list, isolate all those computers, and being able to type in English, isolate all the computers you just gave me a list for, and then making that implement in 3 or 4 minutes would be incredibly powerful. And that is something I'm excited about, because that turns what used to be a multi-hour project, during those multiple hours, bad guys were totally active, going east-west. They know that they're in a fight with you. They're putting more backdoors in place. They're creating more ways for them to maintain persistence. And so if you can turn that from a multi-hour process into a couple of minutes, then that gives defenders the advantage again.
Well, I think it's a great ending point to make because it's a little bit more of a boost to get us from those 88 to 89 to 99% completed projects, maybe, more towards 100 so we don't have those often awful risk registers. Alex, thank you so much for taking the time. I think it's going to be a fantastic talk and appreciate you sharing your knowledge with everyone here in the ISC2 community. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.
That's N2K's Simone Petrella speaking with Alex Stamos from SentinelOne. We appreciate Alex taking the time to speak with us, and we appreciate you listening to our show. Thanks. The IT world used to be simpler. You only had to secure and manage environments that you controlled. Then came new technologies and new ways to work. Now, employees, apps, and networks are everywhere. This means poor visibility, security gaps, and added risk. That's why Cloudflare created the first-ever connectivity cloud. Visit cloudflare.com to protect your business everywhere you do business.